Welcome back to the Daily Motivation English podcast today. I want to share something that can change the way people respond to you, talk to you, even remember you. It's not about being perfect. It's not about knowing all the right words. It's about learning how to truly connect. In this episode, we're going to explore the timeless wisdom from how to win friends and influence people, not like a book summary, but like a spoken journey. Real stories, real emotions, and real lessons that you can use in your daily life at work. With friends, with strangers, and with yourself, you don't need a loud voice to be heard. You just need the right heart behind your words. Let's begin. Have you ever met someone who just made you feel seen, heard, like you mattered? They didn't try too hard. They weren't the loudest. But something about the way they looked at you, listened to you, or maybe smiled, stayed with you, that's not an accident. That's the power of connection. And connection, my friend, is a skill you can learn. Welcome back to the Daily Motivation English podcast. Today, we're diving into a classic that's been changing lives for generations. To Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. But don't worry, this won't be a dry summary. This will be a journey, a spoken reflection, a conversation between you and me, about how small changes in the way you treat people can completely transform your relationships, your influence, and even how you see yourself. Ready? Let's begin with the very first idea. Maybe the most misunderstood. They say, speak your mind. They say, be honest. But when does honesty become criticism? When does telling the truth start pushing people away? It happens more often than you think. Because criticism, even if it feels justified, rarely brings people closer. Think about the last time someone pointed out your mistake. Maybe they were right. Or maybe you even knew they were right. But how? Did you feel defensive, embarrassed, ashamed? That's the problem when we criticize. Even with good intentions, people don't change. They shut down. They pull back. They protect themselves. And instead of connection, we create distance. So Dale Carnegie's first advice is simple. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And that's not just a rule for being polite. It's a principle for powerfully influencing others without force. Let me tell you a short story. There was a young man named Leo. Leo had just started his first job, and he was eager to impress. He worked hard, stayed late, tried to learn everything. But one day he made a mistake, a big one. His boss looked at him and said, nothing harsh, no yelling, no insults, just one quiet sentence. What do you think went wrong? Leo paused. Explained, he took responsibility. And then the boss smiled gently and said, you'll get better. I believe in you. That moment changed Leo's life. Why? Because instead of feeling attacked, he felt trusted. Instead of shame, he felt motivation. And that's the key. People don't change when you shout at them. They change when they feel respected. Criticism hardens. Compassion opens. And when you stop pointing fingers, you start building bridges. So the next time someone makes a mistake, around you pause. Don't criticize. Instead, ask with kindness. Invite understanding. And you'll be surprised how much more influence you have without. Raising your voice. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. And it's just the beginning. You know what people are starving for? Appreciation, not fake compliments, not manipulative. Flattery, but real, sincere, heart-deep appreciation. We live in a world where everyone is trying to prove themselves. Everyone's working hard, trying to be seen, trying to feel like they matter, and so often forget to say two simple words. Thank you. Thank you for staying late. Thank you for making me laugh when I was down. Thank you for being here. Even when it's hard, when you express appreciation sincerely, you do something powerful. You lift someone up. You fill their emotional tank. You remind them they're not invisible. Dale Carnegie said it simply: give honest and sincere appreciation, not because you want something in return, but because it's right, because it's rare, and because it changes people. Let me share a moment. With you, a teacher once told a student, "You have a beautiful way of thinking. I hope you never stop asking questions." That student, she never forgot those words. Years later, when she became a doctor, she said, "It wasn't the grades that pushed me. It was that one moment. Someone believed in me." Think about that. One sentence, one moment of appreciation, and it shaped her entire path. You have that power too. You don't need money. You don't need status. You just need attention and intention. Notice what others are doing right. Point it out. Say it with warmth. Even a small gesture like thanking your friend for listening or your colleague for showing up on time can grow a deeper relationship, because when people feel appreciated, they shine. And when they shine, they trust you more, they open up more, and they become the kind of person who wants to be around you. And let me say this clearly: appreciation is not weakness, it's leadership. So here's your challenge for today. Find one person, notice one thing they've done well, and tell them, not in a loud, dramatic way, just a quiet, real sentence. From your heart, try it. You'll see what Dale Carnegie meant when he said that sincere appreciation is one of the most powerful tools for human connection. What's the sweetest sound in any language? It's not "I love you." It's not "congratulations." It's your name, your own name. There's something about hearing your name spoken with warmth that makes you feel recognized, remembered, and respected. Dale Carnegie believed this so strongly. He made it one of the core principles of human connection. Remember people's names and use them often, not to impress them, not to manipulate them, but to remind them you matter. I see you think about the last time someone remembered your name after meeting you just once. Felt good, didn't it? Now think about the opposite. You walk into a room. You've met this person before, and maybe even had a great conversation. And then they look at you and say, "Sorry, what was your name again?" Ouch. We don't mean to forget names, but when we do, it sends an unspoken message. You weren't important enough for me to remember, and that hurts. So how do you fix it? Make it a habit when you meet someone new. Say their name out loud. Repeat it in your mind. Associate it with something. Use it in the conversation, and later write it down. The point isn't just memory. It's connection. Using someone's name tells them, you're not just a face. You're not just another person in the crowd. You matter to me. And in a world full of distractions, that simple act can make someone feel seen. So try this tomorrow. When you talk to someone, use their name once, not 10 times. Not to sound fake. It's just once, naturally. And watch how they respond. You might see a smile, softening, a deeper interest. Because to them, it's not just a name, it's a mirror of their identity. Asterisk, asterisk. And when you reflect someone's identity back to them with kindness, you build trust. It's that simple, and it's that powerful. Have you ever met someone who listens, and you instantly feel safe? Not the kind who just nods while waiting to talk, but the kind who really listens. Their eyes are focused, their phone is down, so their energy is with you. And when you speak, you don't feel rushed. You feel heard. That is rare, and it's one of the most magnetic things a person can do. Dale Carnegie said it clearly: be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Why? Because people aren't starving for advice. They're starving to be understood. Don't need to fix their problems. You don't need to say something smart sometimes. All you need is to shut your mouth and open your heart. Let me tell you a little story. There was a man who worked in a busy office, always rushing, always planning. But one day, a new intern walked in, a quiet young woman named Ilya. Nobody noticed her much. She kept her head down, but one afternoon the manager saw her sitting alone, and instead of walking by, he sat next to her and asked, "How are you really doing?" She looked surprised. He waited. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened. 10 minutes later, Ilya smiled and said, "Thank you. No one's asked me that in a long time." That moment, it changed how she saw the company. More importantly, she saw herself. The manager didn't give advice. He gave attention. That's the difference. Real listeners don't steal the spotlight. They hold the space. They ask open-ended questions. What was that like for you? Did that make you feel? What do you think you'll do next? And then they wait. They breathe. They let the silence stretch a little, because silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility. And when someone knows you're not just hearing them but feeling with them, walls fall, trust rises, connection deepens. So if you want to influence people, start listening to them. Not to reply, not to be right, but to understand. Next time you're in a conversation, try this. Count how many times you speak versus how many times you let the other person speak. Then shift the balance. Make it your goal to let them walk away thinking, "Oh, they really cared about what I had to say." That's what influence is made of. Not loud words, but quiet presence. Have you ever met someone who listens and you instantly feel safe? Not the kind who just nods while waiting to talk, but the kind who really listens. Their eyes are focused. Their phone is down. Their energy is with you. And when you speak, you don't feel rushed. You feel heard. That is rare, and it's one of the most magnetic things a person can do. Dale Carnegie said it clearly: be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Why? Because people aren't starving for advice. They're starving to be understood. You don't need to fix their problems. You don't need to say something smart. Sometimes all you need is to shut your mouth and open your heart. Let me tell you a little story. There was a man who worked in a busy office, always rushing, always planning. But one day, a new intern walked in, a quiet young woman named Ilya. Nobody noticed her much. She kept her head down. But one afternoon, the manager saw her sitting alone, and instead of walking by, he sat next to her and asked, "How are you really doing?" She looked surprised. He waited. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened. 10 minutes later, Ilya smiled and said, "Thank you. No one's asked me that in a long time." That moment, it changed how she saw the company. More importantly, how she saw herself. The manager didn't give advice. He gave attention. That's the difference. Real listeners don't steal the spotlight. They hold the space. They ask open-ended questions. What was that like for you?
Oh.
Did that make you feel? What do you think you'll do next? And then they wait. They breathe. They let the silence stretch a little, because silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility. And when someone knows you're not just hearing them but feeling with them, walls fall, trust rises, connection deepens. So if you want to influence people, start listening to them. Not to reply, not to be right, but to understand next time you're in a conversation. Try this. Count how many times you speak versus how many times you let the other person speak, then shift the balance. Make it your goal to let them walk away thinking, wow, they really cared about what I had to say. That's what influence is made of. Not loud words, but quiet presence. Have you ever met someone who listens and you instantly feel safe? Not the kind who just nods while waiting to talk, but the kind who really listens. Their eyes are focused. Their phone is down. Their energy is with you, and when you speak, you don't feel rushed. You feel heard. That is rare, and it's one of the most magnetic things a person can do. Dale Carnegie said it clearly. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Why? Because people aren't starving for advice. They're starving to be understood. You don't need to fix their problems. You don't need to say something smart. Sometimes all you need is to shut your mouth and open your heart. Let me tell you a little story. There was a man who worked in a busy office, always rushing, always planning. But one day, a new intern walked in, a quiet young woman named Elia. Nobody noticed her much, just kept her head down. But one afternoon, the manager saw her sitting alone, and instead of walking by, he sat next to her and asked, "How are you really doing?" She looked surprised. He waited. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened. 10 minutes later, Ilya smiled and said, "Thank you. No one's asked me that in a long time." That moment, it changed how she saw the company. More importantly, it's how she saw herself. The manager didn't give advice. He gave attention. That's the difference. Real listeners don't steal the spotlight. They hold the space. They ask open-ended questions. What was that like for you? How did that make you feel? What do you think you'll do next? Then they wait. They breathe. They let the silence stretch a little, because silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility. And when someone knows, you're not just hearing them, but feeling with them, walls fall. Trust rises. Connection deepens. So if you want to influence people, start listening to them. Not to reply, not to be right, but to understand next time you're in a conversation. Try this. Count how many times you speak versus how many times you let the other person speak. Then shift the balance. Make it your goal to let them walk away thinking, wow, they really cared about what I had to say. That's what influence is made of. Not loud words, but quiet presence. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. You're going to mess up. You're going to make a wrong call. Say the wrong thing. It hurts someone you didn't mean to. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. But what happens next? That's what defines your character. Dale Carnegie said it best. Admit your mistakes quickly and emphatically. Because when you try to hide it, deny it, defend it, people lose trust. But when you own it with no excuses, people respect you. More they see your courage, they see your growth, and they feel safe around you. Let me tell you a story. There was a team leader named Asha. She was great motivated, smart, always moving fast. But one day she made a scheduling error. A big one. It cost the company a huge opportunity. Everyone waited to see what she'd do. Would she blame the system? Would she stay quiet? No. She stood up in the team meeting, looked everyone in the eyes and said, "This one's on me. I messed up. I rushed it. I didn't double check. I'm sorry. I've already started fixing it, and I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Silence, then applause. Because that moment wasn't weakness, it was leadership. You know why? Because people trust people who are real, and when you admit your mistakes, you give others permission to be honest too. You create a culture of truth, not fear. You show humility, not pride. And most importantly, you grow. Here's the truth. Mistakes are lessons in disguise, and the faster you face them, the faster you evolve. So the next time you mess up, don't run. Don't hide. Stand tall. Say it clearly. I messed up. Take full responsibility. Then ask, how can I fix it? That one choice will earn you more respect than 1,000 perfect days. Because real strength isn't pretending to be flawless. It's owning your flaws with grace. And that is influence. Principle 1. Don't criticize in real situations. You're in a rush, someone messes up. They forget something. They're late. They say the wrong thing. You feel it in your chest, that heat, that judgment, not the little voice whispering. They should have known better. And maybe they should have. But you've got two choices in that moment. You can criticize or you can connect. Let's say your coworker forgets to send that important email. You've reminded them twice. The deadline is missed. You're frustrated. Now pause. Ask yourself, what's your goal? Is it to make them feel small? Or is it to make sure it doesn't happen again? If it's the second, then start with understanding, not accusation. You could say, hey, I noticed the email didn't go out. Everything okay on your side? That one question shifts the energy. Now they feel safe to explain. Maybe they had a family emergency. Maybe they just forgot. Either way, they feel respected, not attacked. And guess what? People who feel respected are more likely to grow, to listen, to change. So here's a little mantra. I choose curiosity over criticism. Say it again. Let it sink in. That one shift, just asking instead of accusing, can turn a tense moment into a teaching moment. Not just for them, but for you too. Principle 2. Show appreciation. You don't need to buy someone a car. To show you care, you just need to notice them and say it. Let's take a simple example. You walk into your favorite coffee shop. The barista remembers your order, smiles at you, makes your day better, instead of just saying thanks. Just pause and say, hey, I really appreciate you remembering my order. That means a lot. That's it. They light up. Why? Because most people feel unseen, like they're just doing their job. It's like no one notices. Your words genuine, short, and warm can change that. This works with family too. When your partner makes the bed, when your sister picks up groceries, when your friend checks in, don't let those moments slide. Say, that was kind of you. Thank you. And don't wait for big things. Appreciate the small ones, because that's how big trust is built. Appreciation isn't a grand performance. It's a daily practice. And the more you give it, the more people feel safe around you, the more they open up, the more they trust. That's how you win hearts, not by being impressive, but by being grateful. Principle 3. Remember names. Let's be honest. We've all said it. Oh, I'm terrible with names. But here's a question. Are you terrible with names, or just not making it a priority? Because remembering someone's name isn't about memory. It's about attention. It's about value. So let's fix. Step by step. Step 1. When they say their name, repeat it. Hi, I'm Michelle. Nice to meet you, Michelle. Step 2. Say something like, Michelle spelled with one L or two. That extra second locks the name in your mind. Step 3. Use it naturally in conversation. So, Michelle, what brought you here? Step 4. Write it down after the conversation. On your phone. In a notebook? Whatever works. Why go through all that? Because when you say someone's name, you tell them, you matter enough to me that I remembered, and that feeling, that recognition, it's powerful. You don't have to remember everyone, but try this week just once a day. One name, one connection, and watch how doors open. Principle 4. Be a good listener. Having a conversation. They're talking. And in your mind, you're already forming your reply. Sound familiar? It's okay. Well, I'll do it. But here's the magic trick. Don't just listen to reply. Listen to understand. Try this. Next time someone tells you something, respond with a question, not a story. They say, I've been so stressed lately. Instead of, yeah, same here. I've been slammed at work. Try, oh, what's been the hardest part of your week? That one question invites more. It says, I'm here for you. Keep going. This is how connection deepens, not by sharing more, but by listening more. So practice this in your next conversation. Pause, ask, reflect, and when they finish, don't say that's crazy. Say that makes sense. I can see why that would feel overwhelming. Suddenly, they feel safe, seen, heard, and that's the kind of connection people never forget. Principle 5. The value of smiles. You're tired. Your day's been long, and someone bumps into you on the street. Doesn't apologize. Maybe even frowns. You have 2 options. Match their energy, or offer warmth anyway. Smile, not to fake it, but to choose kindness, even when it's not returned. Because smiling isn't always about feeling good. Sometimes it's about creating good. And here's the magic. Smiles are contagious, even on bad days, even with strangers, especially with people who are hurting. Try this tomorrow. Smile at someone you don't know. Not because they smiled first, but because that's who you are. A bringer of light. A gentle interruption in a noisy world. You never know who needed it, but they'll remember. Principle 6. Avoid arguments. You don't have to agree with everyone, but you don't have to argue with everyone either. Here's the rule. Disagree without. Disrespect. Next time someone says something you disagree with, try this instead of, that's wrong, say. That's an interesting view. Can I share a different angle with you? Now you've opened a doorway, not a battlefield. You've invited dialogue, not destruction. You've shown strength and not dominance. And even if they still disagree, they walk away respecting you more. Why? Because you made space for both of you to be human, and that's rare. So speak your truth, but speak it with grace. That's how you keep influence and keep peace. Principle 7. Admit mistakes. Mistakes hurt, but hiding them, that hurts more. So when you mess up, say it fast. Say it clearly. Try this script. I want to say I messed up. I didn't handle that well. I'm learning from it, and I want to make it right. No blame, no shame, just truth. And you'll be shocked how people respond. They forgive faster. They respect more, because what they see is courage, real courage. So here's your challenge this week. If you slip upon it, don't wait to be called out. Step up. Because when you own your mistake, you show maturity, and you earn trust that no perfect performance ever could. Let's begin the first story. A taxi driver who changed a life. It was raining hard that evening. Not the kind of rain that whispers, but the kind that crashes, wild, messy, unforgiving. The city was tired. Horns honked. People rushed past each other, soaked shoes and slumped shoulders. Inside a small airport terminal, a businessman named Ray stood at the curb, bags in hand, trying to wave down a taxi. His flight had been delayed. He hadn't eaten. His phone was at 4%. He was, in a word, frustrated. Finally, cab pulled up. The driver rolled down the window with a smile. "Need a ride, sir?" Ray nodded, climbed in, and grunted his destination. The driver, a man maybe in his early 50s, wore a faded cap and had gentle lines in the corners of his eyes. He didn't speak right away, just turned on soft jazz and drove dot. Ray sighed, leaned back. But after a few minutes, the driver spoke not with noise, but with presence. Tough day. Ray opened one eye. "You could say that." The driver nodded and didn't push. Then he said, "Sometimes I tell myself, if I can make just one person's day a little lighter, then mine was worth it." Ray blinked. "Sorry." Driver smiled through the rearview mirror. "I've been driving 20 years. Every day I meet people. Angry people. Tired people. Lonely people. Most don't see me, but that's okay. I see them. I see the story on their faces. Sometimes, just a smile or a kind word is enough to shift their whole mood." Ray sat quietly. No one had ever said something like that to him, not in the middle of a cab ride. Not after the kind of day he'd had, and that's when it happened. The tightness in his chest eased. He looked up and said, "You know what? I really needed to hear that." The driver didn't say "You're welcome." He just smiled again. 20 minutes later, Ray got out of the cab a little different. Not because of the destination, but because of the journey. Because someone had seen him not as a fare, but as a person. That story isn't dramatic. It isn't about success. It's about presence. And that's what Dale Carnegie teaches us. People don't need you to fix their lives. They just want to be seen, even in a cab, in the rain. After a long flight, you never know when your kindness becomes someone's turning point. So the next time you meet someone, pause. Ask gently. Smile softly. Speak slowly. That's influence, and it costs nothing. Let's move into the second story. The girl who remembered the name Sophie was 17. She worked weekends at a small bookstore, tucked between a coffee shop and a laundromat. It wasn't fancy. Most days were slow, but Sophie loved it, especially the smell of old pages, the quiet space where no one expected her to talk too much. One Saturday, a woman came and rushed, holding a sleeping toddler. Hair in a messy bun, she looked overwhelmed. Sophie smiled from behind the counter. "Let me know if you need anything." The woman barely looked up. 10 minutes later, she checked out, children's book and a used self-help title. As Sophie bagged them, she noticed the woman's eyes were red, rough. Day, maybe. But Sophie didn't ask. Instead, she read the name on the credit card. Alice. That's a beautiful name. The woman paused, blinked, then softly smiled. Thank you. No one said that in a long time. The moment passed. Weeks later, Alice returned, and Sophie remembered. Welcome back, Alice. More stories for the little one? That smile again wider this time. You remembered my name, Alice said, surprised. Sophie nodded. Of course. Alice came back every week after that. Eventually they became friends. What started as a transaction became a connection. All because of one remembered name. That's not just customer service, that's human service. And Dale Carnegie knew it. Remembering someone's name isn't a trick, it's a gift, it says. You're not just passing through my life, you're worth remembering. Try it this week. Call someone by name, not in a formal way, but in a warm, natural way. You'll be shocked how deeply people respond. Not because you said something grand, but because you saw them. His name was Daniel, mid-30s.com, steady. Rarely raised his voice. He wasn't the kind of manager people feared. He was the kind of manager people respected. Not because he was the smartest, but because he made people feel capable even when they messed up. There was one day the entire office remembered. A huge project had gone wrong. One critical file wasn't backed up. A week's worth of work. Gone. Everyone was panicking. Fingers started pointing. Whispers flew from desk to desk. All eyes eventually turned toward Mia, a junior staff member. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't meant to delete the file. She had followed the steps. But something had gone wrong. She looked like she was about to cry. Daniel walked into the room. The air was thick with silence. He looked at Mia, then looked at the team, and he said something no one expected. Let's solve the problem before we assign the blame. He didn't yell. He didn't shame. He sat beside. Mia asked her to walk him through what happened, step by step, gently, calmly. And then he said, okay, that was a mistake, a human one. Let's build a system to make sure it doesn't happen. Again, that was it. No lecture, no punishment, just accountability. Paired with compassion, Mia stayed late that night, voluntarily working to fix the issue. The next week, the entire team followed Daniel's example. When someone else made a mistake, no one snapped. They helped. Because when leadership is kind, the culture becomes safe. And when people feel safe, they do their best work. That's what Dale Carnegie was teaching us. When you criticize people, shrink. When you protect people's dignity, even when they mess up, they grow. You don't lose influence when you show mercy. You gain loyalty. You build trust. And that trust, it's priceless. Next time someone makes a mistake, breathe, pause, and ask, do I want to punish this person or develop them? Because one harsh moment can destroy a relationship, but one graceful one, it can change someone's life. Let's move to the next story. The man at the train station, a story of unexpected influence from a stranger. It was winter. It's a kind that bites through your coat. It's a kind that turns breath into fog. The train was late. People huddled on the platform, scrolling their phones, pacing, sighing. Among them was an older man, probably in his 60s. Standing alone, no phone, just watching next to him was a young woman, early 20s, clearly anxious. Checking the time every few seconds, fidgeting. The older man looked over and said softly, First time on this route? Surprised? Yeah, I'm visiting my mom. Haven't seen her in a while. He smiled. That's beautiful. She must be excited. She laughed nervously. She doesn't even know I'm coming. The man paused, then said surprises like that. Stay with people forever. His tone was gentle. No agenda. No advice. Just presence. She opened up, talked about how she and her mom had grown distant, how she wasn't sure if this visit would heal things. The man didn't give a speech. He just said, when someone shows up, that says more than 1,000. Apologies. The train finally came. They boarded different cars. She never got his name. But weeks later, she told her friend, a stranger reminded me who I want to be. Sometimes influence happens in silence. Sometimes a moment of kindness from someone we don't even know can give us the courage to repair something we thought was broken. Dale Carnegie's ideas aren't just for big moments. They're for every day. One's on a platform, in a shop, on a phone call. Wherever you go, your words, your tone, your presence, they leave a fingerprint on people's lives. Make it a kind one. Let's move into the next story. The CEO who sent a handwritten note. Her name was Clara. She had just finished her 3rd month at a new company, a big tech firm. Thousands of employees, fast-paced, competitive. Clara wasn't high up. She wasn't even in management. She worked in operations. Quiet work, behind the scenes. The kind that keeps everything moving, but rarely gets noticed. One day she stayed late to fix a mistake that wasn't even hers. A vendor had missed a shipment. She made 10 calls, sent 20 emails, found a backup supplier, saved a deadline. No one really said thank you, but she didn't mind. She just wanted to do a good job. A few days later, she found something in her inbox. Not her email inbox. It's her real one. A small white envelope. No logo. Just her name in handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a short note in neat cursive. Clara, I heard what you did to fix the shipment delay. That kind of initiative and care doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you for being someone we can count on. David, the CEO. She stared at the note for a long time. It wasn't printed. It wasn't formal. It wasn't long. But it hit her deeply, because in a company of thousands, someone at the top had taken a moment to recognize her, and not just with a bonus or a shout-out in a meeting, with a personal word of appreciation. That note stayed on her desk for years, and from that moment on, she gave even more. Not because she had to, but because she felt seen. That's what Dale Carnegie meant. Appreciation doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be real. If you're in a position of, even if you're not to remember this, a simple thank you, when it's specific, when it's sincere, can fuel someone's belief in themselves, and people will never forget. How you made them feel, not with grand speeches, but with quiet recognition. So try it this week. Write one note, send one text, speak one sentence of honest gratitude to someone who thinks they're invisible. You might just light a fire that changes everything, Jason. Eli had been best friends for 10 years, since college. They'd been through everything together, first jobs, heartbreaks, late-night talks about dreams, and disappointments. But one day, that friendship almost ended. It started with a joke. Jason made a comment at a dinner party. He thought it was funny. Everyone laughed except Eli. He didn't say anything in the moment, but after that night, he grew distant, didn't return texts as fast, avoided calls, said he was busy. Jason noticed, and at first, he got defensive. It was just a joke, he told himself. He's being too sensitive. But then, one quiet evening, Jason sat with that thought. He replayed the moment. He remembered the look on Eli's face. Not angry, just hurt something. Inside him shifted. The next day, called Eli. He didn't start with an explanation. He didn't justify. He simply said, "Hey, I think I messed up. That comment I made the other night. I thought it was funny. But I realize now it might have made you feel small. I'm sorry. That's not the kind of friend I want to be." There was silence on the line. Then Eli exhaled. Slowly, "Thanks for saying that," he said. "It did hurt."
Oh, but hearing this,
"It means a lot." And just like that, the wall came down, not because the problem was erased, but because the ego was Dale. Carnegie didn't just talk about influence. He talked about humility, about how admitting you're wrong, even when it's uncomfortable, makes people lean closer, not pull away. When you say, "I was wrong," you give someone the space to say, "I forgive you." And in a world where everyone's trying to look perfect, that kind of honesty is a breath of fresh air. So here's your reflection for today. Is there someone you need to call? Not to explain, not to defend, but to simply say, "I'm sorry." Sentence of courage can restore what pride tried to destroy. The quiet influence of listening. Nate was 16, not a bad kid. But like most teens, he clashed with his parents. A lot, especially his dad. Everything turned into an argument. Homework, curfew, chores, even what music played in the car. One evening, after another slammed a door and another silent dinner, Nate's mom said something. That stuck. She looked at him not angry, just tired, and said, "You two talk, but neither of you listen." That night, Nate lay in bed and thought about it. He realized she was right. He was always trying to prove he was right, always trying to win. But not once had he asked himself, what if I listened first? So the next weekend, when his dad started talking about some project, at work Nate did something different. He stayed quiet. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't pretend to listen. He actually listened. His dad talked about a deal that almost fell through, about how hard it was to manage a team under pressure, about how he missed playing the guitar. The way he used to in college, Nate didn't interrupt once. And at the end, his dad looked at him and said, "Thanks for letting me talk. I needed that." The moment passed, but something had shifted. Their fights didn't magically stop, but something softened between them. Because listening, it opened a door that yelling never could. That's the power of presence. Dale Carnegie said, "Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves." Why? Because people carry stories they're desperate to share, but they're waiting for someone safe enough to hold them. You don't need to be wise. You don't need to fix anyone. You just need to listen like it matters. And the beautiful thing, it does. Because when someone feels truly heard, they heal just a little. So the next time someone speaks to you, don't fill the silence. Don't jump in with advice. Just stay with your eyes, with your body, with your breath. Stay. That's what love sounds like when it doesn't need words. The smile that saved a life. There's a story that's been shared many times, but each time it's told, someone hears it at just the right moment. It's about a man named Evan. He was quiet, smart, always polite, but behind his smile, he was hurting. Most people didn't see it. He went to work. He answered, "I'm fine." He laughed at the right moments. But inside, he was drowning. One day he made a decision. He walked out of his apartment with no plan to return. But as he passed through a small park on his way to wherever the pain was leading him, something happened. A woman walking her dog looked up, met his eyes, and smiled. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't forced. It was human. A simple smile. A second later, her dog wagged its tail at him. She laughed and said, "Looks like he likes you." Evan blinked. He hadn't spoken to anyone all morning, but in that moment, something cracked open. He smiled back. "Just barely," she said. "Have a beautiful day." Kept walking. That was it. No speech, no grand moment, just a smile and a sentence. But something about it, the timing, the humanity, the softness, shifted something in him. He walked to a cafe. Instead of the bridge, he got a coffee, sat in the corner, and cried. Later, when he told the story to a support group, he said this: "I didn't need someone to fix me. I just needed one reason to believe the world still had kindness in it. That woman? She'll probably never know what her smile did, but it saved him." That's what Dale Carnegie taught us, though maybe he didn't say it quite this way. Influence isn't just about business. It's about being human. It's about remembering that people are. It's carrying battles you'll never see. And sometimes, your small kindness might be the only good thing in their day. So, smile. Not because life is perfect, but because someone might need it more than you'll ever know. And you'll never regret giving kindness. What they remember, a reflection on legacy, character, and what really stays in people's hearts. Think back to someone. You once knew someone who left a mark on you. Maybe it was a teacher, a friend, a grandparent, stranger you only met once. Now ask yourself, what do you remember about them? Was it their title, their salary, their Instagram followers? Probably not. You remember how they made you feel? Maybe they looked you in the eye when no one else did. Maybe they made you laugh on a hard day. Maybe they listened when you didn't. Even know how to ask for help. Maybe they believed in you. Before you believed in yourself. That's what we remember. Not resumes, not diplomas, not how many meetings they scheduled. We remember kindness, presence, warmth. Dale Carnegie reminded us over and over, people don't remember your achievements. They remember how you treated them, because people are emotional beings. We crave respect. We bloom with encouragement. We carry quiet wounds that long to be seen. So here's a question for you. How will people describe you when you're not in the room? What stories will they tell? Will they say they were always the smartest? Or will they say they made me feel important when I didn't feel important to anyone? Because that's your real influence. It's not just what you do. It's how you show up in the hallway, at the dinner table, in the inbox, in the silence between words. The legacy you leave isn't built in one big moment. It's built in tiny ones. The thank yous, the eye contact, the patience when someone's slow, the courage to say I'm sorry, the choice to listen instead of interrupt. That's what stays. That's what matters. So take a moment right now to pause. Ask yourself gently, what will they remember? And more importantly, what do you want them to remember? It's never too late to rewrite the answer, because every smile, every kind word, every soft presence, it echoes. Even after you're gone, the compliment that never died. Her name was Lila. She was 11 years old. quiet, shy, always sitting in the back of the classroom. Drawing in the margins of her notebook, she didn't speak much. She wasn't the one with the highest grades. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't like being noticed. One day, her English teacher, Mrs. Thomas, walked by as Lila was sketching something in her notebook. It was a drawing of a tree, simple, gentle, almost poetic. Mrs. Thomas stopped. She looked down, smiled, and said softly, "That's beautiful. You have a special way of seeing the world." Then she walked away. Lila froze. No one had ever said something like that to her before. She went home that day and told her mother, word for word, what Mrs. Thomas said. And that night, Lila drew again. Not because she had to, but because something in her had been seen. Years passed. Lila grew older, went to college, started a quiet career in design. One day during an interview for a new job, she was asked, "What made you choose this path?" She said, "When I was 11, a teacher told me I had a special way of seeing the world. I've been trying to prove her right ever since." She paused. That compliment never left me, you see. Words don't disappear, especially the kind ones. They stay, they echo, they grow roots in someone's memory, and flower years later, sometimes quietly, sometimes into a whole career, a whole identity. Dale Carnegie said, "Give honest and sincere appreciation." Why? Because you never know what that compliment might become to you. It's one sentence. To them, it might be the reason they keep going. So think about this. Who changed your life with one kind word? And whose life can you change with yours? It doesn't. Take a speech. It doesn't take a stage. Just a moment, a sentence, a little warmth wrapped in sincerity. And that, my friend, never dies. The day he chose grace over ego, David was a senior executive at a mid-sized company, confident, sharp, the kind of person whose presence filled a room. People respected him, admired him, but they also feared him, not because he was cruel, but because he was rarely wrong. At least that's how it seemed. He always had the right answers, the sharpest ideas, the last word in meetings. Until one day, he didn't. It was a Monday morning strategy session. His team had been working on a new product rollout. David stood in front of the whiteboard, explaining the plan with confidence. Halfway through, a junior analyst named Priya hesitated and said, "Actually, I think that data might be outdated. We pulled a newer report last night. The numbers are different now." The room went quiet. Everyone watched David. His jaw tensed for a moment. He looked at the screen, then at the updated file. And for a second, everyone expected the usual, a deflection, a lecture, a quick shift to save face. But David didn't do that. He looked at Priya and said, "You're absolutely right. Thanks for catching that." Then he turned to the team. "I want to own that mistake. I moved too fast. Let's correct it together." And just like that, the room changed. The atmosphere shifted from tension to trust. People sat up straighter, spoke more freely. You could feel it, because the most respected person in the room had just modeled something powerful: humility. Dale Carnegie taught this again and again. Admitting you're wrong doesn't make people respect you less. It makes them trust you more. It says, "I care more about getting it right than looking right." That's real leadership. That's influence that lasts beyond the meeting room, because people will forget your title. They'll forget what you wore, but they'll never forget how you responded. When you could have chosen ego, you chose grace instead. So here's a quiet challenge. Next time you're tempted to defend a mistake, just to protect your image, pause. Ask yourself, what do I want to be remembered for right now? My pride or my character? Then choose the answer that leaves peace behind you. That's the kind of influence that lingers. Long after you've left the room, the stranger on the bench, he sat alone on a weathered wooden bench, tucked between two trees at the edge of the park. His name was Robert. Dressed neatly, like someone raised in a time when shirts were ironed and shoes were polished even, on an ordinary Tuesday, every afternoon he came to the same bench. Didn't talk much. Didn't ask for anything. Just sat and watched. Some people nodded as they passed. Most didn't, until one day, a teenage boy sat down next to him. Didn't speak. Didn't even look at Robert. He just sat, shoulders tense, eyes focused on nothing. Robert didn't say a word. He just stayed. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The boy finally exhaled, loud enough for Robert to hear, and whispered, "I don't know if I can go back home today." Still, Robert said nothing. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer advice. He simply turned his head slowly and nodded, that nod, gentle, quiet. Full of "I understand" without a single word was enough. The boy sat a little longer and eventually said, "Thanks." Then he walked away. They never saw each other again. But years later, the same boy, now grown, told a friend, "There was one day I didn't want to go home. I was overwhelmed, angry, scared. And this old man, he didn't fix me, even speak. But he sat next to me like it was okay to just be human." Dale Carnegie reminded us, sometimes you influence people most, not by what you say, but by how fully you stay. When you're not in a rush to speak, trying to win. When you're simply there with your full attention, your stillness, your presence, that's when people feel safe. And in that safety, something powerful happens. People open up. People soften. People remember. You don't have to have the answers. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is to just not leave, and that alone can change someone's life. The question that changed everything, Lena, was to 8. She had a good job, a quiet apartment, a routine that made sense, but something inside her felt off. She couldn't explain it. Every day, she woke up with a weight she couldn't name. She smiled at work, replied 2 messages, went to yoga on Thursdays. But deep inside, there was this quiet ache, like she was drifting through her own life. One Friday evening, she went to dinner with an old friend from college, someone she hadn't seen in years. They caught up, laughed about old memories, talked about life, jobs, and everything in between. And just as the check arrived, her friend looked at her and asked, "Are you happy or just busy?" Lena froze. The table went quiet. She looked down at her glass of water. The question did something. She didn't answer right away. She didn't even know how to answer. Because in that one moment, all the quiet doubts, all the background noise in her heart came into focus. That night, she went home and wrote in her journal for the first time in months. She wrote pages about how she'd traded her passion for safety, about how she hadn't painted in years, about how she said yes too often and no too late. That one question had cracked her open, and from that day forward, slowly, very slowly, she began changing. Not everything at once, but little things. She left the job that drained her, started painting again. She even traveled alone for the first time. And years later, she told someone it wasn't therapy. It wasn't a breakdown. It was one question asked at the right time. By someone who cared. Dale Carnegie said, "Ask questions that draw people out. Encourage others to talk about themselves." But this is the deeper part. When you ask someone a real question, one that shows you're not just being polite, but that you actually care, you can spark something life-changing. And you don't need to fix them. You just need to ask and wait with silence, with softness, with patience. Because often the most powerful things we say are not statements. They're questions. And in those questions, people find their own clarity. Here's one for you. Ask yourself, right now, am I fulfilled or just familiar? There's no pressure to change everything, just permission to look deeper. And that's where transformation begins. The day the compliment didn't come, Marco was known for his charm. The way he walked into a room. People noticed. He had the stories, the timing, the smile. He was the kind of person who always got compliments. Great presentation, Marco. You're amazing at this. How do you always sound so confident? And he loved it. It wasn't just nice, it fueled him. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The compliments started to fade, not because he got worse, just because life got busier. People were focused on their own problems. The novelty wore off, and suddenly he felt invisible. He didn't realize how much he depended on that constant feedback too. Feel like he mattered. Until one afternoon, he went to visit his sister and her family. Her daughter, 4 years old, ran to him with messy hair and marker stains on her arms. "Uncle Marco," she shouted, "want to see what I made?" She dragged him to the floor, held up a paper covered in blue scribbles. "It's a spaceship," she said proudly. And Marco, still wearing his expensive watch, his work badge, his tired face, smiled gently and said, "That's amazing. You're an artist." She beamed. Not because it was rehearsed, not because it was perfect, but because he saw her. And in that moment, something cracked open in him because he realized all this time he'd been chasing validation from strangers, and what he really wanted was to feel seen and to see others. That night, he wrote in his journal, "I don't want to live a life where I only feel valuable when someone claps. I want to feel worthy when the room is quiet." Dale Carnegie taught us about giving appreciation, but here's the other side. You can't depend on praise to hold up your confidence, because if your self-worth is tied to someone else's applause, what happens when they stop clapping? You'll crumble. But when your confidence comes from within, from knowing that you listen, that you care, that you speak with honesty, that you see others with kindness, then no silence can shake you. So, here's a quiet question for you. Who are you when the compliments stop? And better yet, can you still give kindness, even when you don't get any back? That's where true power lives. That's where influence becomes character. The intern who changed the culture, she was too nervous. Fresh out of university and just starting her first ever internship at a marketing agency in the middle of the city, her name was Amira. She didn't know much about the job yet, but she knew one thing. She wanted to be kind in the fast-paced, coffee-fueled chaos of office life. Amira noticed something: people rarely looked each other in the eye. Meetings were rushed. Emails were sharp. Rare. People talked about deadlines, never about each other's days. So Amira started doing something simple. Every morning, She walked into the office and said, "Good morning. How are you today?" Not just in passing, she paused, waited, looked people in the eye at first. Some people mumbled. Some looked surprised. But after a week, something started shifting. People started responding, and not just with fine. They actually talked. "I didn't sleep much last night. I'm a little overwhelmed this week. I'm excited about the pitch. Wish me luck." Amira listened. With warmth, with stillness. With respect, she didn't fix. She didn't rush. She just listened. And somehow, that changed things. People began slowing down around her, smiling more, checking in with each other. The department head noticed. One day he asked Amira to speak at the Monday morning meeting. "Tell them what you've been doing," he said. She blinked. "I've just been asking people how they're doing." He smiled. "Exactly." And so she did. She spoke softly. Just for 3 minutes. But it stuck. Weeks later, the agency started a new tradition. They called it 2-minute check-in. Every meeting began with a round of, "How are you really?" Led one intern. Without a title, without power, without. A corner office had changed the culture. Dale Carnegie said, "Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely." But here's the magic no one talks about. When you make others feel important, you become unforgettable, not because you were loud, not because you were brilliant, but because you were present, you cared, and people remember that long after they forget everything else. The promotion that didn't heal him, Ethan, had always been ambitious. He had the grades, the drive, the 5-year plan. Every job he took, he excelled. He rose quickly, from intern to analyst, to manager, to senior director. He worked weekends, missed birthdays, slept with his phone on his chest, but he told himself, it'll be worth it. Then one date happened. The email arrived. Subject line, "Congratulations." He'd made it. VP, the youngest in company history. His hands trembled as he read the offer. He'd done it. He'd finally arrived that night. He sat alone in his apartment. Takeout. On the table. His phone buzzing with LinkedIn notifications. Congratulations messages. Fire emojis. Applause. He smiled. But then, something strange. As the messages slowed down and the night got quieter, he didn't feel what he thought he'd feel. Not joy, not peace, not pride, just emptiness. A quiet voice in the back of his mind whispered, "You won the race, but lost yourself in the run." Because somewhere along the climb, Ethan had forgotten what he was climbing for. He hadn't called his dad in months. He couldn't remember the last time, read a book just for fun. He hadn't laughed a reel. Belly deep laughing, what felt like years. He had success, but not connection. He had applause, but not affection. That promotion, it didn't heal him. It only made the silence louder. Dale Carnegie never said ambition was wrong, but he reminded us you can gain power, wealth, influence. But if you don't know how to connect, you'll still feel alone at the top, because it's not the title next to your name that fills your soul. It's the relationships around you, the kindness you give, the warmth you offer, the memories you make when no one's watching. So here's the question. Are you climbing for the right reasons? And when you get where you're going, we'll be standing there with you. The influence of ordinary days. No cameras, no applause, no headlines. Just an ordinary morning. The kind of day you forget the next week, but for someone else, becomes unforgettable. That's how influence really works. It doesn't always look like a big speech, or a leadership role, or a dramatic transformation. Sometimes it looks like this: a mother tying her child's shoes with extra care. Even though she's late for work, a cashier saying, "Take your time." To an older man searching for coins in his pocket, a neighbor knocking just to say, "Hey, I made. Extra soup, want some?" Or a friend replying, "Call me anytime," even though they're tired too. These are the moments no one sees, but they matter more than we think. Let me tell you a true story. A high school janitor named Mr. Paul worked in the same building for over 30 years. Every day, same routine: cleaning, fixing lights, refilling paper towels. He wasn't loud. He didn't speak much, but every student knew one thing: Mr. Paul smiled at everyone, every day. No matter what, rain or shine, finals week or spring break, he remembered names, gave fist bumps, picked up trash. Without being asked, when seniors graduated, they'd write messages in yearbooks like, "Mr. Paul, thank you for making this place feel like home. Your smile helped me survive high school." When he retired, the entire school showed up for him, not because he was flashy, but because, day after day, he chose kindness when no one was watching. Dale Carnegie said, "The unremembered acts of kindness are often the most remembered, because the truth is people may forget your words, but they will never forget the way you made them feel and the way you treat people on the ordinary days." That's what builds your legacy, not in the spotlight, but in the hallway, the elevator, the waiting room, the inbox. That's where your true influence lives. So here's something to remember. You don't have to do something big to matter today. Just be gentle. Just be present. Just be real. And the impact, it'll ripple farther than you'll ever know. Imagine this: years from now, someone says your name in a room you're not in. They're smiling. Not because you gave them money, not because you had the loudest voice, but because you showed up for them. When they didn't expect it, maybe it was the way you listened, or the way you remembered their name when others forgot. Maybe it was your smile. When their world was falling apart, maybe it was how you said, "I believe in you," when even they didn't. You didn't do it to impress. You didn't do it to be remembered. You just did it because that's who you are in that. That's influence, not power over people, but love with people. Not control, but connection, not the ability to change their mind, but the ability to touch their heart. Dale Carnegie didn't write a book about tricks. He wrote a book about truths. The truth that people are soft inside, no matter how tough they seem. The truth that appreciation feels like water to someone who's been emotionally thirsty. The truth that names are sacred, that listening is healing, that criticism wounds. But compassion builds. And the deepest truth, that the smallest moment of sincere human kindness can leave an imprint on someone's entire life. So as we close this journey, here's what I want you to carry. You already have everything you need to influence people deeply. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be fluent. You don't need more status. You just need presence, attention, kindness, a gentle heart. With a steady voice, you don't win people by being impressive. You win them by being human. And in a world full of noise, your gentleness is power, your silence is presence, your patience is strength, your care is unforgettable. Thank you for walking through this with me today. Thank you for listening with your heart, and thank you for being the kind of person who wants to grow, not just in skill, but in character. That's rare, and that's beautiful. Until next time, remember, it's not how loudly you speak, it's how deeply your words make people feel. And the more you live with intention, the more your influence will live on long after the moment is gone.